I always thought betrayal would come like thunder, loud, dramatic, impossible to miss. But the truth is, it's quieter, slower. It slips in under the door like a draft you ignore until one day the whole house is cold. My name's David, and I'm just a regular guy from Marion, Indiana. I've been married to Karen for 12 years. Not a perfect marriage, but steady, dependable. I teach high school history. She's a dental hygienist. No kids, just us in a simple ranch house with a patchy lawn and a leaky faucet I always meant to fix but never quite got around to. We had our routines. Pizza every Friday, errands on Saturday, church on Sunday. We weren't exciting, but we worked. Or at least I thought we did. Looking back, I see the first cracks. The girls' nights that used to be once a month creeping up to every week. The way she started dressing up for errands. Lipstick for the grocery store. And then the phone always in her hand, face down whenever I walked into the room. I told myself not to worry. Told myself she deserved a life outside of me. But the space between us kept growing, like we were two puzzle pieces from different boxes pretending to fit. Then came the day it all broke. I pulled into the driveway after school, thinking about nothing more than dinner and the stack of essays I had to grade. And there he was, a stranger standing at my front door. He was tall, fit, leaning against the doorframe like he belonged there. His shirt a little too tight, his smile a little too practiced. And I knew, before he even opened his mouth, I knew. When I stepped out of the car, he turned, gave me a once-over, and said he was here for Karen. That they'd been together for months. And then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, he said he wanted me to divorce her. He said it right there, on my porch, in my face. And in that moment, something inside me went very still. Not broken, not shattered, just still. Because that wasn't the end. Not even close. It was only the knock at the door. I don't remember deciding to move. 1 second I was standing at the end of the driveway, watching this stranger, no, this intruder, smirking at me from my own doorstep. And then the next, I was walking toward him, slow, steady, like gravity had tilted, and all I could do was follow it. He didn't flinch. He kept leaning against the doorframe like he belonged there, arms crossed, chin tilted up like he was daring me to do something. And I did. I didn't say a word, didn't announce it. I just stepped up and swung. My fist connected with his jaw with a sharp crack I still remember, the kind of sound that's part impact, part relief. His head snapped sideways, and his smug smile disappeared into a grimace of shock and pain. He staggered back, one hand flying to his mouth, blood already blooming between his fingers. I should have stopped there. But I didn't. Maybe it was the months of suspicion. Maybe it was the quiet humiliations I swallowed every time I saw Karen's locked phone or heard her empty reassurances. Maybe it was standing face to face with a man who'd been living in the shadows of my marriage, thinking he could just waltz into my home and demand my wife like she was something he'd earned. Whatever it was, it pushed me forward again. I kicked him once in the ribs, hard enough to fold him over. Then again, sending him sprawling into the bushes beside the porch. He groaned, curling up like a kicked dog. I stood over him, chest heaving, my own hands trembling with something colder than rage. He looked up at me from the dirt, his face twisted in shock, pain, and for the first time fear. "Stay away from my house," I said, my voice low, almost calm. "You show up here again, and it won't stop here." He didn't answer, just whimpered, wiping blood from his mouth, crawling back to his feet. I watched him limp to his shiny black pickup parked down the street. He didn't look back, just drove off. And then it was quiet again, the kind of quiet that's too big to fit inside a house. I turned and opened the door, and there was Karen, standing in the hallway, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I told you it wasn't what you think," she said, voice tight. But I didn't answer. I didn't even look at her, because something inside me had shifted. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one trying to hold it all together. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Karen move around in the next room. She didn't come in. I didn't expect her to. We were two strangers in the same house now, orbiting each other like Death Stars. Funny how silence can be heavier than words. Around 2 a.m., I got up and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where we used to drink coffee on Sunday mornings. The same table where I once imagined we'd grow old together. Now it felt like a piece of neutral ground in a war I hadn't agreed to fight. I opened my laptop and started typing. Not angry emails. Not bitter rants. Plans. Cold, focused, meticulous plans. First, I emailed a lawyer, an old college friend I hadn't spoken to in years, but always respected. I didn't spill everything. Just enough. Need to discuss possible divorce proceedings. Urgent. Then I pulled up the bank accounts. I already knew about the joint account. What I hadn't realized was how much she'd been quietly funneling out over the past few months. Small withdrawals, disguised as bills, as groceries, as casual expenses. But they added up. Thousands missing. My hands shook, but not with rage. It was something colder, sharper, clarity. By dawn, I'd set up my own account, changed the passwords, pulled copies of every statement I could find, bookmarked a dozen articles about asset protection and divorce law in Indiana. By the time Karen finally walked into the kitchen, wearing her robe and pretending nothing had happened, I was already 5 steps ahead. She poured herself coffee like we were still living the same life. "Rough night?" she asked, her voice breezy. I looked at her, really looked, and saw a stranger in my wife's skin. "Not as rough as yours is going to be," I thought. But I didn't say it. I just smiled, nodded, and watched her drink from the same mug she'd used every morning for 12 years. Because the fight wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be fists or screaming. It was going to be quiet, calculated, relentless. And I was ready. The lawyer called me back the next afternoon. His voice was steady, measured, but I could tell he was quietly impressed by how prepared I already was. "You're coming into this with your eyes open, David," he said. "That's more than most." I told him I didn't have the luxury of being blind anymore. We talked for over an hour. He laid out the options: property division, spousal support, discovery. He warned me it might get messy. I told him I wasn't afraid of messy. I was afraid of unfair. When we hung up, I felt something strange. Not relief. Not satisfaction. It was a quiet resolve, like setting the first stone in a wall you know will take months to build. By the end of the week, I'd closed every joint credit card, froze the home equity line, pulled title documents on the house. Quiet moves, nothing flashy, but each one a small step reclaiming what I'd let slip away. Karen didn't notice at first. She kept living her double life like the walls weren't closing in. But then the letters started arriving, notices from the bank, statements she couldn't access, frozen lines of credit. She came home one night, tossed her purse on the couch, and asked why her card was declined at the salon. Her voice sharp, indignant. I just sipped my coffee. "Might want to call the bank." She stared at me, suspicious now. "You did something." I smiled. Not cruel, not mocking. Just calm. "I'm protecting what's mine." That was the first time I saw it, a flicker of fear in her eyes. But it wasn't over. Not even close. 2 days later, I got served. Divorce papers. From her lawyer. Filed fast, aggressive, like she was trying to get ahead of me. I read them carefully. She wanted the house. Half my pension. Spousal support. Attorney's fees. The works. And that's when I realized. She thought I'd fold. She thought I'd roll over. Take the blame, pay the price. But she didn't know the man she'd married wasn't the same man she was divorcing. I wasn't fighting for her anymore. I was fighting for me. I wish I could say I was surprised by the divorce papers. But honestly, I wasn't. It wasn't just a legal move. It was her way of saying she'd already rewritten the story in her head. She wasn't leaving a marriage. She was escaping a villain. And in her version, I was the bad guy holding her back. But what she didn't count on was how quietly I'd already started preparing for this chapter. I handed the papers over to my lawyer the next morning. He read them, eyebrows raising at the demands. "She's swinging for the fences," he muttered. "We'll counter." But even he didn't expect what happened next. That same afternoon, Karen's lover showed up again. Not at the house this time, at my workplace. I was standing in the teacher's lounge, sipping coffee between classes, when the secretary knocked and poked her head in. "David, there's a man asking for you at the front office. Says it's urgent." My stomach sank. I walked out and saw him standing there, arms crossed, sunglasses still on inside the building, like he thought he was in a movie. "I need to talk to you," he said. I glanced around. "Not here." We stepped outside, near the parking lot. He leaned in close, lowering his voice. "She's changed her mind." I blinked. "About what?" "She doesn't want to leave you anymore." I almost laughed. "Really?" "She says you're ruining everything. Freezing accounts. Blocking credit. She wants you to stop." I stared at him for a long moment, letting the weight of his words settle. "She's asking you to tell me that?" I said quietly. He shifted, uncomfortable. "Look, man, this wasn't supposed to be messy. I thought you'd just step aside." That was the moment it hit me. He didn't love her. Not really. He wanted the fantasy, the thrill. He wasn't prepared for the reality of dismantling a marriage. And neither was she. "Well," I said, stepping back, "tell her she made her bed." He frowned. "So you're not backing down?" I smiled, calm, steady, unshaken. "No, I'm just getting started." And for the first time, I saw it, not just doubt in his eyes. Fear. He wasn't ready for this. Neither of them were. When I got home that evening, the house was too quiet. Karen was sitting at the kitchen table, phone in her hand, her thumb tapping nervously against the case. She looked up as I walked in, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't wear that polished mask of calm. Her eyes were wild, tired, cornered. "You talked to him," she said flatly. I hung up my jacket. He showed up at my work. Not exactly subtle. She stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen like a trapped animal. "I didn't send him. I didn't know he'd do that." I leaned against the doorway, watching her. "Doesn't really matter, does it? He's speaking for you now." She froze, turning to me with a mix of frustration and something closer to panic. "This isn't how it was supposed to go, David." I raised an eyebrow. "No? How was it supposed to go?" She exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples. "I thought you'd be, like every other guy. Angry. Maybe leave. Maybe hook up with someone else and forget about this. I didn't expect you to fight like this." And there it was. The quiet confession. She hadn't planned for resistance. She thought I'd crumble under the weight of betrayal. She thought I'd hand her everything out of guilt or exhaustion. But I didn't. "I'm not every other guy," I said quietly. She sat back down, burying her face in her hands. "I can't afford this, David. I didn't think it would get so complicated." I stepped closer. "You wanted the fantasy, Karen. The clean break. The new beginning. But you never thought about what it costs to burn a bridge." She looked up, eyes rimmed red. "I don't want to lose everything." And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't sorry. She was scared. Not because of what she'd done, but because she finally understood there were consequences. I stood over her, steady, calm. "It's not about what you want anymore." And I walked past her, into the living room, leaving her in the silence she'd made for herself. Because now it was my turn to decide how the story ended. A week later, the letter arrived. I found it in the mailbox, tucked between bills and flyers, her name written in looping cursive on the front. No return address. Just David, in her handwriting, like we were back in college passing notes between classes. I stood on the porch for a long time, holding it, turning it over in my hands. Part of me didn't want to open it. Part of me hoped, foolishly, that it was some kind of apology, an explanation, a crack in the mask. But when I opened it, I realized it wasn't for me. It was a goodbye letter. Not to me. To him. Inside was a confession, page after page, scrawled in frantic ink, telling him she couldn't do it anymore, that she missed her old life, that he wasn't what she'd imagined, that he wasn't enough. She wasn't leaving me for him. She was running from him back to me. I sat down on the porch step, reading the words twice, 3 times, feeling a strange emptiness settle over me. It wasn't vindication. It wasn't satisfaction. It was nothing. Because I realized, painfully clear, she wasn't coming back because she loved me. She was coming back because she didn't want to be alone. And as I folded the letter back into the envelope, I knew, whatever future she was hoping for between us, it wasn't waiting here. I stood up, walked back inside, and placed the letter on the kitchen table where she'd see it. No note, no words, just the letter. And then I called my lawyer. "File it," I said simply. "No settlement. We go all the way." Because sometimes, winning isn't getting them back. It's knowing you never needed them to begin with. The day of the hearing arrived under gray skies. I stood outside the courthouse, hands in my pockets, watching people hurry past with umbrellas and briefcases. My lawyer was already inside, reviewing the file. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even angry. I felt steady, like I'd walked a long road and finally reached the gate. Karen showed up 15 minutes late, flustered, her hair pinned up too tight, makeup covering the sleepless nights under her eyes. Her lawyer shuffled beside her, already whispering urgently. When she saw me, she looked away. No words, no smile, just that flicker of fear again. Inside the courtroom, it felt surreal, like watching someone else's life through glass. Her lawyer made demands. Mine countered calmly. They threw around numbers, property lists, legal jargon. I watched it all unfold like a quiet storm. Then came the surprise. "Your Honor," her lawyer said, clearing his throat, "my client wishes to submit new evidence regarding financial assets." My lawyer stiffened beside me. "What evidence?" Karen handed a folder to her lawyer, who passed it to the judge. I could see the edge of a document, a bank statement, highlighted transactions. My lawyer whispered, "She's trying to claim you've been hiding assets." I blinked. "I've disclosed everything." He shook his head grimly. "She's reaching." But as the judge flipped through the papers, a frown deepening, I felt it, that familiar cold clarity. She wasn't just trying to win. She was trying to destroy. And for a flicker of a moment, I felt something close to pity. Because the harder she fought, the more she revealed her own desperation. The judge set the papers down. We'll take a recess to review. As we stepped outside the courtroom, my lawyer leaned close. She just gave us ammunition. False accusations can backfire. I looked across the hall at Karen, sitting on a bench, head in her hands. And in that moment, I realized something simple, profound, and heartbreaking. I hadn't lost her. She'd lost herself. And no courtroom could fix that. After the recess, the judge didn't take long. He returned to the bench, cleared his throat, and ruled in our favor, rejecting Karen's claims, citing insufficient evidence, even warning her lawyer about potential penalties for filing false accusations. It was done. At least, the legal part was. But as I gathered my papers, watching Karen slump in her chair, a strange heaviness filled me. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't joy. It was the quiet weight of an ending. Outside the courthouse, I found her sitting alone on the steps. The wind tugged at her hair. She didn't bother to fix it. Her hands trembled in her lap, her eyes staring at nothing. I could have walked past her, could have left her there. But instead, I sat down beside her, silent at first. After a while, she spoke. I didn't want it to end like this. I looked straight ahead. Nobody does. She wiped at her eyes. I thought I'd feel free. I thought I don't know, be someone new. I let the silence settle. Then, you could have been. But you tried to build freedom on someone else's ruin. She winced. I wasn't trying to ruin you. No. I turned to her now, calm but firm. Then what do you call the lies? The accusations? Trying to bleed me dry? She swallowed hard. I was scared. I sighed. We all get scared. But we don't all burn everything down. She fell quiet again, pulling her coat tighter around herself. Are you happy now? I thought about it. No, I admitted. Not happy. Not yet. I stood up. But I'm free. And as I walked away, leaving her behind on those courthouse steps, I realized that freedom doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like standing still after the storm, looking at the wreckage, knowing you survived. And that was enough. A month passed. The house was quiet now, truly quiet. No footsteps in the hall, no half-empty coffee cups left on the counter, no faint sound of her blow dryer in the morning. Just me and the hum of the refrigerator. Some nights, I still waited for the sound of her key in the lock, out of old habit. But it never came. And slowly, the waiting faded. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel bitter. I felt like a man relearning how to breathe in his own skin. I kept teaching. I cleaned the garage. I took up running again. Small things, ordinary things, but they felt different now, like reclaiming pieces of myself I hadn't even realized I'd lost. Then, one rainy Saturday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find her mother standing there. Umbrella in hand, raincoat buttoned to the chin, her mouth a thin line. Hi, David, she said. Can I come in? I stepped aside, wordless, letting her pass. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Karen had once written grocery lists and I'd graded papers late into the night. I wanted to say something. Her mother began. I know you probably don't want to hear it, but I'm saying it anyway. I waited. She made a mistake, she said quietly. A big one. And she's paying for it every day. You don't see it, but I do. I looked down at my hands, resting on the table. She didn't just make a mistake. She made choices. Repeatedly. Her mother nodded, a sad smile on her lips. That's true. I won't argue with you. She paused, then added softly, she always thought you'd be there, no matter what. I sighed. That's the problem. She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. I'm glad you're okay. I worried. We all worried, after everything. I met her gaze, steady. I'm okay. She stood to leave, pausing by the door. If you ever want to talk, you know where to find me. And then she was gone. I stood in the doorway, watching the rain blur her figure down the street, feeling the strangest mixture of sadness, peace, and something close to forgiveness. Not for Karen. For myself. Because walking away from love doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes, it means you finally understood what it wasn't. I woke up early the next morning, before the alarm, before the sun. The house felt still, but not empty anymore, like it had taken a deep breath and settled into its new shape. I brewed coffee, opened the curtains, and stood by the window as dawn crept over the neighborhood. The street was quiet. The world felt soft, unhurried, like it was giving me a rare, gentle pause. I didn't think about Karen, or the court, or the wreckage left behind. I thought about the man I'd become, a man who didn't collapse under betrayal, who didn't let bitterness rot him from the inside, who fought, not for revenge, not for control, but for his own dignity. And in that quiet morning light, I realized I hadn't just survived. I'd grown. Somewhere between the heartbreak and the battles, I'd built a version of myself that wasn't defined by her leaving. I was free, truly free, not because I'd won in court, not because she'd lost, but because I'd stopped waiting for an apology, an explanation, or a different ending. I took a sip of coffee, stepped outside onto the porch, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt something unexpected. Hope. A small, quiet hope, but enough. And as the sun finally broke over the rooftops, I smiled to myself, knowing the best part wasn't behind me. It was waiting ahead.